tell me your full name and when you were born?
Gilbert C. Durrell, 1948, October 16th, 1948.
So that makes you
76 years old come this, no, I've already had my birthday. That's right.
happy belated birthday.
76. Never figured I'd make it this long.
Well, today we're going to learn a lot more about you and a lot more about this town, I hope. So can we start out with you telling me a little bit about your parents to start with?
Yes. My father, well, let's see. My grandfather lived right here in Industry when I was a child. He ran the store in the old Grange Hall. And when they bombed Pearl Harbor, my father went into the service, and they sold the store to Kai's, which was Buddy's father, Harold. And when my father got back from the war in '45, he purchased the garage next door here and opened up a garage business, sold tires and used cars and did minor repairs, that sort of thing.
Did you ever hear any stories about your grandparents? Do you know much about your grandparents or great-grandparents?
Well, my grandfather on my mother's side had a farm over on Shaw Hill Road. He sold apples, and during the war they shipped barrels of apples to England.
And what was the family name?
That was Robbins.
Robbins.
That was my mother's maiden name. Yeah, Robbins. And then my grandfather on my father's side, as I say, lived here. I believe they came from Kingfield.
Oh.
And then my great-grandfather on my mother's side bought the house right across the way here. And that was his retirement home after he moved off the farm. They had like one cow and one horse, and that's where they retired. He was the town constable, I believe, when he retired. They say he ruled with an iron hand. He had seven boys, and when they would get roughhousing up in the open chamber, he would open the chamber door and say, "Less noise or less boys," and they say you could hear a pin drop after that.
Oh my goodness!
So he was quite a guy, I guess.
Can you remember much about what their house was like?
My great-grandfather's house was up at the end of the Hennessy Road. And I believe I remember you could come in on the first floor by going around the back, and the basement floor had a walkout basement. So when they retired and their children took over the farm, they just moved upstairs, and the children moved in downstairs or something like that. But then when he moved off the farm, he moved over here. Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about what it was like living in this area when you were a child?
Mm-hmm. Well, when I was a child, this house and the garage was sort of, I mean, we were always having people in for lunch or something. There was always something going on right in this area. Either the store or the garage was kind of the center of activity. We had the only gas on the lake, so we would be able to fill up boats or cars out by the road. And I never really had a job at the garage, but I was always expected to look after things. If Father needed to go to town or whatever, if I was available, I had to look after the garage, you know, pump gas, that sort of thing, change tires and whatnot. But I also used to, I gave water skiing lessons to the Pecks up here.
Oh, yeah.
And my father was always getting after me I was getting like $30 an hour, which was big money back then.
I guess so.
And my father would say, gee, let's see, it's my gas, my boat, my water skis, and I don't get any cash out of this. He always give me grief about that, but you know, he never paid me for working at the garage, so I just kind of, I said, well, I'll just hang on to that. Yeah,
Huh.
but that was kind of a family joke. But anyway.
So what was here like, for example, if you had to describe the 1940s or 50s here in
40s,
industry?
I wouldn't know.
Well, 50s.
Yeah.
What was here for businesses then?
Well, there was the store at the Grange Hall, which Buddy Keyes ran, the garage, which my father ran. Win Tolman had the store right on the corner here, the White House where Schuler's are now. And then Leslie Taylor had a small garage on the other corner.
What about your school, your elementary school?
Well, I actually went to a one-room schoolhouse for the first 4 years or so of my schooling. I still can't spell. But she had all 8 grades in one room.
Where was that?
Right up behind what was Lee's house. You know, well, they built 2 classrooms on after I left. And
What are your memories of being at that school?
well, I remember we used to, we always had a play. And with all the stuff our teacher had to do, this was Buddy Keyes' mother was our teacher, Ruby Keyes. We always had this play that we put on at Christmas time. And when it got close to Christmas, she'd have a couple of the older boys go out and cut a Christmas tree and bring it into the schoolhouse, and we'd decorate that. And we always had a play up at the Grange Hall, you know, in the evening. And that was a big deal. You know, it was kind of cool.
I bet.
Yeah.
So that was elementary, and then where did you go after that?
I went into Farmington to Ingalls School.
Did everybody do that?
Everyone, I think they kept the first 4 grades out here, or first 5 grades, something like that.
Okay.
And then after a while, they closed the school and we all went into Farmington.
What was your parents' religious background? Did you have any religious background?
Oh yes, my mother belonged to the Congregational Church right here at Shorey Chapel.
Okay. So that's been around. Tell me a little bit about the Shorey Chapel.
Well, my earliest recollection was Kent Ratcliffe was our pastor, and he lived right in this house just past the outlet. And he was pastor for a long time. And when he gave that up or passed away, we had another gentleman, Dora Sawtell's son-in-law. I think he was pastor for a while, and then John Tolman became our pastor.
Okay.
Whatnot, yeah.
So that it's always been a fairly active,
Oh yeah,
even now.
yeah. They used to call the faithful dozen. It got down pretty small at times, but now they're thriving again, I guess you'd say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now there's nothing in Industry except for the town hall, and I've always wondered why, all of a sudden or gradually the stores left, the gas station left, the Grange left. Why did everything stop?
Well, the way I remember, we used to have about 2,000 population.
And now it's about 800.
And my mother did the census in 1970. It was 347. And now,
Really?
and now you say it's close to 800.
Yeah.
And basically we had two mills in town, West Mills and Allen's Mills.
And they were actual mills.
Yeah, oh, they were quite active.
What kind of mills?
Turning mills, sawmills, that sort of thing. You know, make all kind of widgets and whatnot, yo-yos or whatever, and skewers and what, you know, things that turning mills turned out, that sort of thing. I think New Vineyard is making a lot of those items now. The Webbers have a mill up there. But no, Ratcliffe owned the mill for a while, and he also owned what was Win Tolman's store. And my grandfather had the Grange Hall store. So there was a little bit of competition there.
When the mills closed, the population declined?
Yeah, they all went in town. The shoe shops were booming, and people would move into the shoe shops. And the corning factory, corn shop in Starks was thriving when I was younger.
Yeah.
Just kind of a gradual decline. Well, when my father first came back from the war, they actually ran a ballroom up over the garage. Oh. It was wide open space. They would have dances, have live bands, they had a little stage up there. Oh. And my mother said they ran it for a while, but as venues got bigger, they could pay the bands more money. So, and we couldn't expand here. So she said the bands, you know, you have a 6-man band, you couldn't divide it up, you know, as inflation went up and whatnot, the bands were demanding more money, so they just closed it down. And actually my father made a deal with Noyce Tire. Oh. that they would supply tires for up over the garage. So we had more tires than probably any of the garages in town. And for a while, we probably sold more tires than all the garages in town put together. Okay. Just because he made this deal with them, so he had the inventory. And I know it was kind of a comical thing. He would actually sell tires to his competitor here in town cheaper than he could buy from the company. and it was he just did that because, I don't know, because he wanted to, I guess, and whatnot. But he would do all kinds of crazy things. My dad was a bit of a character.
He was?
You might say, yep.
In what way?
Oh, gee, he had quite the gift of gab, and he was always joking around, doing stuff. And Christmas time, he would buy maybe a dozen boxes of chocolates and give them out. And he would, Christmas Day, I remember, my father and my uncle and myself, we drove down Chattagee to see the Wilsons. Now, the Wilsons were an old couple that basically, when they got in for the winter, they stayed in their house all winter. They didn't come out much. Maybe walked out to the mailbox. And so Christmas Day, we'd get down and we'd bring her a box of chocolates, and he'd bring a bottle of whiskey or something and offer them a drink for Christmas Day. And I can remember grabbing onto the roof of the porch and sliding down in, because they didn't shovel the path or anything. Oh. You'd slide into the front door. And the way they got out of the house in the wintertime was they'd walk out through the shed and the barn, and then they could open the barn door by sliding it, so they didn't have to shovel. And they just treaded a path to the mailbox and back, and that's about it for them.
Somebody brought them food, or they just had all their own food?
They had a lot of their own food, and they'd come up and buy food at the store, but you wouldn't see them very often. But they were kind of shut-ins. We'd go there, we'd go over to Ruby Collins. She was another character in town that we would go over there, and her friend had a dog, I remember. And he'd give her a box of chocolates and offer him a drink. And the guy would say, "You want to see my dog do a trick?" And he'd take a cracker, and he'd get the dog to sit down. They'd be all excited. He'd sit, and he'd place the cracker on the dog's nose. And he'd wait, like that, and the dog would go, "Ooh," and grab the cracker. That was their little entertainment for the day, and I just remember that part of the trip, I guess.
When you were growing up, what did you do for fun?
Oh boy. Well, in the summertime, as I mentioned, we water skied quite a bit. We had a friend of ours by the name of Allo Hennings. He was very capable mechanic, build anything, do anything, and the Hennings and the Durrells were good friends, so they were out here a lot, and we decided we wanted to try water skiing. So he built some water skis. He built a boat. We had a 12-horse CB on that boat, on this plywood boat, with no neutral. Now, that was quite a chore to learn to water ski, because you'd have the gas throttle on the motor, and we'd pull the trigger on the motor to start it, and it'd take right off. It had no neutral. So you kind of had to be ready. and that's how we first learned to water ski. And I was only probably 10 or so, something like that. And so we'd do that. We water skied. Father had a lot up the lake, and we'd go up and work on clearing the lot and cut a tree, and we screwed a piece of plywood to the stump of the tree for a table. We'd have it up table height, and we'd camp out and have lunch there or something. And we just did all kinds of things like that. Wintertime, we were skiing. My dad we'd hook a water ski rope onto the back of the pickup. And when, we'd have fresh fallen snow before they sanded the roads, my dad also would plow out the guy over on Shaw Hill Road. He was a lawyer from Saco, and he'd come up to Sugarloaf to go skiing. So he'd call ahead, and Father'd go over and plow him out and start the furnace in the old farmhouse that he'd inherited. And so I'd tie the water ski rope on the back of the truck, and I'd ski behind. On the way over, I'd ski behind the truck with my snow skis on. And when we got to Kai's Hill, which was like this and like this, was a little tricky, because I would start catching up with the truck. So he had to keep going faster and faster and faster as he hit the bottom of the hill. And then we'd go up, and we'd have these big snowbanks. So, if we met a car, we'd kind of I'd be, not as good a place as I'd want to be. so, he would just keep going, so the rope wouldn't get too slack. And then as we went up the hill, because it tightened up again.
Sounds a little dangerous.
Oh yeah, well, I said we used to do things. My father had a junkyard up the road. In the wintertime, when I got older, a bunch of us guys would take parts from this car and that car and battery from here and get them running, and we'd drive them on the lake in the wintertime. And at night we'd play tag. And so it's kind of like a demolition derby. And whoever was it would flip on the headlights. Everybody else turned the lights off. So you'd go along and you'd bump into them, try to tag them. And it was fine as long as we didn't have too many fish houses show up, because you couldn't always steer, always make a turn when you want to, and you wouldn't always see the guide wires to the fish houses. Sometimes they would put a guy wire on and freeze it into the ice so that the wind wouldn't blow the fish houses over, because they were just made out of canvas or whatever. So we had to be a little careful of the guy wires, because we could stave up a ice shack pretty easy. But those are.
Did you also ski at the mountain?
Oh yeah.
At Saddleback or Sugarloaf?
Tickham at first,
Tickham.
out here, and then Sugarloaf. I skied quite a bit at Sugarloaf, yeah. when
And that
when it was
mountain-
first. Well, it only had, when I was there, it had 3 T-bars, and we didn't have any warm-up pants back then. So you'd wait an hour on the first one, an hour on the second one, and maybe a half hour on the third one, just to get to the top of the mountain. By the time you get there, you were so cold that it took you half the run just to warm up enough so you could move.
Did they have a lodge back then?
Oh yeah, yeah.
They did.
But as soon as we had warm-up pants, oh, that changed my
Made
life.
a difference.
Yeah, because I was always a skinny kid and I was always cold. But no, we did that. We never had any great amount of money, but I didn't feel poor, but we were. You know, we just did a lot of things
Yeah.
because this was kind of the center of activity. Arlo and my father built a snow traveler, and they took an old Jeep and they shortened it up, and they cut the beading off a skidder tire, or yeah, I guess it was skidder tire. Cut the beading off so they could stretch it, and they stretched it over 2 tires. So, and then they had brakes, so you'd steer it with brakes just like you would a crawler tractor. So they built this thing, and they backed it out of the garage the first time. And you know, everything was snow covered, and we probably had 3 feet of snow on the lake. And we backed out of the garage. We turn it around. It'd go around the circle. It was going fine. So they go over to the public beach area, and they go up over the snowbank and down, and they had a plowed road part of the way out there. And then they would go up over the bank, and you'd go off country to see what this thing would do. Well, gee, it was going great. And then they thought they'd come home, so they pulled on the brake to turn. And when they did, because the tracks came off, and there they were. 3 feet of snow, and when you have 3 feet of snow on the lake, you have about 6 inches of slush at the bottom, because the weight is pushing the ice down, and any seam, any fish hole or whatever, water comes up on top of the ice and makes this slush. So I remember we had 2 wreckers to have enough cable to get out to the snow traveler and bring it in. And I don't remember much after that of that ever going anyplace. They couldn't keep the lag on the tires was their flaw. But that didn't stop them from trying. They loved to build something and do something just to see if they could do it. Yeah. We also, you know, we talked about Runaway. Well, this is one of the boats that we used to look after. It was a Garwood or a Chris Craft. And we had a guy by the name of G.E. Taylor that had taken over Runaway. They used it kind of as a family compound by the time I came along. And he had a Garwood and a Chris Craft. These are big wooden boats with big inboard engines. So we'd have to get them out and let them soak for a couple of weeks before Taylor got here so they wouldn't sink. And I used to have to pump them out with this big 4-inch suction pump by hand. This was G.E. Taylor. This was G.E. Taylor and his wife.
And who were they again?
They were the ones that bought Runaway.
Okay.
And his brother wanted to run it as a boys' camp. And they did
And that's the big one?
at the end of Moe's Cove.
Okay.
Yeah. And this was some of the, prior to him buying it,
Great picture.
this was a gentleman's club, and they had all these guys that would come up to go fishing and whatnot. And I understand they all had their own beer stein and pipe rack on top of the mantle in the fireplace. And these are just some interior pictures of the place. And this is the outside of the camp. Now this, that's a pretty good size. Oh, I do remember my dad saying when they ran the store, he remembers weighing a salmon or a togue. He had to put a board on the scale, and he weighed the fish at 32 pounds. They also had...
They made a pond.
They made a pond, and they raised their own trout. So they dammed up a stream and stocked it with trout, and when they got a certain size, they would let them out the dam and into the lake.
Wow.
So it was quite an operation back then. I told you my dad was a bit of a character. This was a 4th of July celebration, and they had the...
In Farmington?
The parade was in Farmington, yes.
Okay.
But everyone would get their float ready, and this was a still that someone had, probably my father.
A real still?
Oh yeah, it would work. I never saw him running it because I think it was years ago. It was done away with more or less, but they had what they called the Bull Horse Fusiliers. This was a group, they called themselves the Fusiliers. It's where they said the women draw from the hip and the men help them drink it. That was their little motto. Supposedly it was a fifth of whiskey, and the women had a fifth of whiskey and the men helped them drink it. That was just a saying they had.
Speaking of bull horse, that was the original name of Clearwater?
Well, there's a legend that, a bull and a horse drowned out here. And so they called it a bull horse pond. How accurate that is, nobody knows. But they've always called it Bull Horse Pond, Clearwater Lake, Crystal Lake, all kinds of, mainly from the clear water that it had. And this was a picture of this was in the later years, but just to give you an idea, we did get some pretty good snow back then.
Yes.
I can remember jumping out the second floor window of the garage into a drift. I can remember tunneling into the gas pumps so the town truck could get gas to plow the roads. This was just clips from the newspaper. They had dedicated the town flagpole to my dad, and this was dedication day. They called him the mayor of Bull Horse Pond. Just because. And just like, Moe's Cove. Billy Moe's ran supposedly a house of ill repute up there.
Somebody told me about that.
Because, we had Runaway, which was the gentleman's club, and then it disbanded, and the Taylors bought it. And before it disbanded, a guy by the name of Dr. Bishop wanted to join, and they didn't let him join. So he says, all right, heck with you guys, I'll go build my own. So he goes over and he builds his own lodge and cabins and whatnot to do the same thing Runaway did, basically. And he hired a gal by the name of Billy Moe, and she was quite a character. So what's kind of interesting, it's not necessarily the people that make the most money, but the characters are where all the roads and the spots in town get named after. Like Billy Moe was from Moe's Cove. High Minott was another one, the Naughton Road up here. He was a character, kind of a recluse, and he would come in to town to buy his groceries, and he was a little bit on the lazy side. He had a kitchen cook stove. And in the wintertime, when he ran out of wood, well, he'd already broken the firewall out between the firebox and the oven. So he'd run out of wood, so he'd go out and cut a tree down, and he'd prop it up in a chair and feed it in through the oven. And it would burn down, and when it burned down, he'd just feed it in a little further. He didn't have to cut the wood. Well, you can imagine what the inside of that kitchen looked like. It was just soot and black as a boot, you know. And that's how he survived. He lived. If it got real cold, he would walk down the mountain to Ramstel's, and they were his closest neighbor, I guess, at the time. And they would take him in, and she'd put a rug or a blanket on the floor in front of the fireplace, and that's where he'd sleep, because he was a little ripe. He'd take a bath once or twice a year, probably. But
and you knew him?
Oh yeah, he was a little scrawny guy that
didn't have a wife.
No, I don't think he ever married. He'd always have a whole fistful of money in his pocket, and that was his claim to fame. One that no one ever rolled him, but he'd go into Bauer Small's store in Farmington and buy some stuff and talk with people a bit, and then he'd hike back home. He was a character. Yeah. My uncles would always go up and visit him every summer when they'd come from New York to stay at the family homestead, and they'd always bring him some food and stuff, and just to talk with him, because he was an interesting guy.
Can you think of any other characters, colorful characters?
Well, my father always used to talk of, what was his name? Arthur Moulton. Now, the story with him was he lived over on 148, and he was a contractor in Boston. And he got jilted by his girlfriend or whatever, so he came up here and kind of gave up on things. And he lived in a little shack on 148. He had 2 workhorses. He was a heck of a good carpenter, but he just had a wall between his bed and the hovel that they stayed in, these 2 big workhorses. He had a little hatch door he'd open up, and they could stick their head through, and he could pat them or whatever, right from his bed. And my grandmother hired him to build kitchen cabinets, new kitchen cabinets. And the deal was he got $3 a day, I think, plus room and board for his horses. He also built a beautiful place up on an island in Rainsley. And the only way he'd do it is if he could bring his horses with him. So they built this raft, put the horses on the raft, towed it to the island, and they stayed on the island all summer while he was building the camp, or the big camp and whatnot. And but he was a character. My father would always quote him, Wall. He said he'd be changing his socks. He'd buy a new pair of socks, take 2 or 3 pair off, put the new pair on next to his skin, and then put the other ones right on over to be warm. And he'd be picking some lint out of between his toes, putting this on, a little gross. And the guy'd come by and, what you doing? Wall, he'd say, you've heard of spring cleaning, haven't you? Or dry cleaning, haven't you? Or something like that. He was a character. We had people that come in the garage from Boston area, and he'd sat around. He was a slow, moderate guy, and they got talking about Boston. He said, yeah, you know the church in Boston on such and such a street. Oh yeah, we did a little work there. He says, well, I built the belfry up there and stuff. Oh yeah, sure you did. And then he went on to tell them 2 or 3 things that you'd only know if you had built it. And
Right.
they were pretty amazed that he was living up here in Industry, Maine, and had built this beautiful belfry and probably part of the church as well. But yeah, he was a character. I think he worked at some of the mills off and on a little bit, but he didn't push too much. Just survived. This is a picture back in the probably 60s or 70s. This is my father here. This is Irvin Sirks, who was a surveyor. And this is F.W. Berner. This is the realtor who I went to work for when I first got out of college.
Okay.
And then I wound up buying his business and whatnot. And
Now, where
but
did you
this-
go to college?
This is at a town meeting. This is a picture at a town meeting, I would say. I went to Hudson Business College over in Bangor.
Oh.
Yeah. Then when I came back from college, Berner had asked my father if, I'd worked for Irving Sirks, helping on the surveying crew. And while we were surveying up in Rangeley, we were surveying part of this township that Shelton Noyce had purchased, and we were surveying all these 10-acre lots right on the lake, about 300 feet wide and 1,400 plus feet deep, and called spaghetti lots back then. And we're surveying, 20 of them all at once. And one noontime, we were sitting around, Irving and I and another guy, and he says, I guess I'm going to take my license for real estate. I says, they're offering a course this summer. And so I says, something's going on here. I don't know what, but I says, I think I want to get my real estate license. And he says, I'll go with you. So he and his wife and I we all drove down to Augusta twice a week for, 3 months or something to get our real estate license, which we did. And when I got out of college, Berner had asked Father if I'd ask me to come in to talk to him. And so I did. And so he says, if you come to work for me, he says, 5 years, I'm out of here. And I'll sell you the business if you want it. I says, well, I don't know anything about real estate. I said, what do I tell these people? He says, well, you tell them this. You tell them you don't know anything about it, but your boss does. And he's seen it in Ohio, and he's seen it in Florida, and it's going to happen here. He says, land is just too cheap. It's going to go up. So he says, everyone was coming up from the Boston area, and they would want a piece of land.
What would the land cost then?
Well, when I started in 1971, it was just turning about $100 an acre. We did have some.
But lakefront was.
Oh, not lakefront. This was just raw land.
Yeah.
And they didn't qualify anything. We did have one 500-acre piece at $50 an acre.
Huh.
So anyway, he'd say, show them the land, and if it's something close to what they want, not quite what they want, he said, buy it anyway. Next year we'll double your money. And that's exactly what happened. 71, it was about $100 an acre. 72, it was $200. 73, it was about $400. 74, it was probably about $600. It started to.
What is it now?
Oh, gee, who knows? 1,000, 2,000 an acre, maybe. The building site would be a lot more. Just an acre or two might be 25 to 50,000, and but beyond if you bought a big piece of land, we used to tell people, the larger the parcel, the lower the price per acre, but more total dollars. So that's kind of how it worked. Yeah. Oh, and they didn't qualify anything at first.
I don't know what that means.
Well,
qualify.
you could buy 50 acres for $5,000, $100 an acre, and then you might buy 50 acres of a little field, stream, a view, $5,000. It was all the same as by the acre. Well, it didn't take long before someone who had a nice little building site with a field and a view and a stream was worth more to them and everybody else than a cut-over woodlot. So right off the bat, you would qualify lots, and the better the lot, the higher the price per acre, and more total dollars as well. So it that's how it kind of started. But I mean, we were coming out of an era in the 50s and 60s that a lumber guy might buy 300 acres, cut it off, and give the land away so he wouldn't have to pay taxes on it. And then he'd go buy another lot and cut the wood off.
Interesting.
So, but when it hit $100 an acre, a lot of farmers said, "Oh, this is a chance to. I've hung on to this land all my life. Now I can get rid of it and get a halfway decent price for it." Little did they know it was going up in leaps and bounds, but you know, it had to start someplace.
Can you tell me a little bit about how you met your wife?
Oh, I met my wife. Well, I came home one day and my sister had brought her home. My sister was living in Auburn at the time, and she and Connie were driving back and forth to college. Connie lived in Auburn, Lewiston, and her last semester, last year, my sister had met her because she needed a ride home on weekends, so they connected somehow, maybe off a bulletin board or whatever. And so they would ride back and forth, and they got to know each other pretty well. And she says, "Gee, you ought to meet my brother." So she brought her out to the lake, and I happened to be here with another friend, so I didn't really have a chance to talk with them much. And so anyway, we met, and then eventually we dated and whatnot, and got to know each other. But our first encounter was not as good as it might have been.
Because the other girl?
Yeah, because the other girl was here, yeah.
Huh.
But anyway, that's how we met, through my sister.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
And how many years have you been married now?
Oh, gee. 52, Connie?
Yes.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
How did I get engaged?
What's that? Oh, how to get engaged. The lake was always a big thing for me, and when we got engaged, it came out on the back of one of my ads. We used to run ads in the local paper, and on the back side it says, "Lewiston girl to marry Clearwater Lake man." and we had a lot of people that would come up with that paper in their hand from Boston. They'd say, "Gee, is this you?" On the back here. And I said, "Yeah, I didn't realize they'd put it on the back of one of my ads, but anyway, that's just how it happened." But no, when we got engaged, we drove around the lake, and up in Moe's Cove, there's a beaver house up there. So we got over in the corners, and I had pulled out the ring to ask her to marry me, and I says, "If you marry me, you're going to have to work like a beaver." And I thought it'd be good to have a little visual. So we stopped at the beaver house, and that's where we got engaged.
And you said yes?
Yeah, foolishly probably, but anyway. Yeah.
Can you think of anything else you want to add to this interview?
Oh, I'm sure there's all kinds of stuff, but I can't think right offhand.
Do you have any words of wisdom or advice? For one thing, you've been married for 50-something odd years. What would you give as advice to young persons starting off these days?
Oh, boy. I think you probably ought to ask somebody besides me. We were just fortunate to live this long, I guess.
Okay. And the key to a happy marriage? agree with everything she said?
Just agree with the wife. Yep, that helps.